The hidden reality behind St. Mary's General Hospital. St. Mary's General Hospital stood as a symbol of prestige, a beacon of top-tier medical care catering to an affluent community. Its pristine wide halls, bustling with seasoned doctors and well-groomed nurses, exuded an air of professionalism. But beneath the polished surface, a darker reality lurked, one built on unspoken hierarchies, deep-seated biases, and power struggles hidden behind forced smiles and neatly pressed scrubs. If you find stories like this compelling, make sure to hit that subscribe button for more thought-provoking content on RVM, Black Struggles. Alicia Johnson, a determined and highly skilled nurse, had worked tirelessly to earn her place in this world. With a strong academic record, glowing recommendations, and an unshakable passion for patient care, she had every reason to believe her new job at St. Mary's would be the start of something great. Yet, as she stepped through the hospital doors on her first day, a wave of unease settled over her. The shift was subtle at first, quiet whispers trailing her steps, lingering glances exchanged between colleagues, a moment of hesitation before someone returned her greeting. It wasn't long before the warmth of the hospital's reputation gave way to the cold reality of its culture. The nurse's station fell silent as she approached, and the head nurse barely looked up before gesturing dismissively toward a clipboard. Then came Dr. Richard Hayes, the highly respected yet notoriously arrogant head surgeon. He towered over Alicia, his piercing blue eyes scanning her as if evaluating a lab specimen. "So, you're the new hire," he muttered, his tone devoid of warmth. "I trust you understand that we maintain a certain standard here. Let's hope you can keep up." With that, he turned on his heel, leaving Alicia standing alone in the hallway, her outstretched hand still waiting for a handshake that would never come. Would you have stayed and fought for your place? Or walked away? If this story has you hooked, comment 1 if you like it, 0 if you don't, and if you have no opinion, just hit that subscribe button. Meanwhile, a seemingly ordinary patient, Thomas Bennett, lay in his private suite on the 4th floor, his arms immobilized in heavy casts following a severe skiing accident. He watched the interaction unfold from a distance, his sharp gaze lingering on Alicia longer than necessary. A slight smirk tugged at the corner of his lips. Things were about to get interesting. If you believe stories like this shed light on important issues, don't forget to like, share, and follow RVM, Black Struggles for more powerful storytelling. Alicia tried to shake off the discomfort lingering in her chest. But the atmosphere at St. Mary's made it impossible. It wasn't just the dismissive attitude from Dr. Hayes, it was everything. The cold politeness, the awkward silences, the way conversations seemed to die the moment she stepped into a room. She knew this feeling. It wasn't unfamiliar. Her mother's words echoed in her mind. "You'll have to work twice as hard, baby girl. They'll always make you prove yourself. But don't you dare let them see you break." And so, she didn't. Alicia powered through her first week with unwavering professionalism, handling everything from routine vitals to assisting in critical care. But her workload? Twice as heavy as her colleagues. The most difficult patients? Always assigned to her. Like Mr. Donaldson, a cantankerous elderly man notorious for his racist outbursts. The moment Alicia entered his room, he scoffed. "You're my nurse?" he spat. "I told them I don't want. I'm here to take care of you, Mr. Donaldson." Alicia cut him off smoothly, refusing to let him get the satisfaction of seeing her flinch. She completed her duties swiftly, ignoring the insults muttered under his breath. But it wasn't just the patients. During lunch, she sat at a table in the break room, only for everyone else to quietly stand and leave. In meetings, her suggestions were met with dismissive nods or outright interruptions. It was subtle, almost untraceable, but it was there, like a fog of silent disapproval that followed her every move. Yet, amid the hostility, one person was watching her closely. Thomas Bennett, the mysterious patient in room 412, observed everything with a keen, calculated eye. One evening, as Alicia finished her rounds, she passed his room and found him studying her. His gaze wasn't unkind, just curious. "Rough day?" he asked, his voice steady, measured. She hesitated before answering. Why did he care? "Nothing I can handle," she said, forcing a small smile. Thomas tilted his head, his expression unreadable. Something in his eyes told her he wasn't just making conversation. And for the first time since she arrived at St. Mary's, Alicia had the unsettling feeling that someone was waiting for her to prove something. But for reasons she couldn't yet understand. By the second week, Alicia had come to expect the unspoken rules of St. Mary's, the subtle exclusion, the impossible workload, the way she was always assigned the most difficult cases. It was a silent war, waged not with words, but with glances, dismissive gestures, and the weight of unfair expectations. But that night, she stumbled upon something far more dangerous. It was nearly midnight, and Alicia had just finished a grueling double shift. She passed by one of the conference rooms on her way to the locker room when she heard hushed voices inside. Something about the urgency in their tones made her pause. "We need to be careful. We can't just get rid of her outright." Alicia's breath caught in her throat. "If she messes up, it'll take care of itself," another voice added. Then came a voice she knew all too well, Dr. Richard Hayes. "She will mess up. It's only a matter of time." A cold dread settled in Alicia's stomach. She should have walked away. Should have pretended she didn't hear it. But something inside her wouldn't let her. She had to know. Carefully, she pressed her back against the wall, listening. She doesn't belong here. And we all know it. The board is already looking for ways to cut staff. If we make the case that she isn't meeting standards, well, it won't be hard to justify letting her go. A sharp laugh. Someone else added, "People like her always crack under pressure." Alicia clenched her fists. They were setting her up to fail. She turned to leave, but in her haste, she knocked into a janitor's cart. The noise shattered the silence. The voices inside the room stopped. A door creaked open. Alicia froze. Then, a hand grabbed her wrist and pulled her into the shadows. She was about to scream when she recognized the face in the dim light. Sarah. The blonde nurse who had never spoken a kind word to her. Sarah pressed a finger to her lips, whispering, "You need to go. Now." Alicia was too shocked to respond. "I don't like you," Sarah admitted, her voice barely audible. "But I hate what they're doing more. So listen carefully. You don't have allies here. Watch your back." Then, she was gone, slipping into the darkness before Alicia could process what had just happened. Alicia's mind raced as she left the hospital that night. They were plotting against her. Deliberately. Strategically. She needed to be careful. But someone else had been watching, too. From his hospital bed, Thomas Bennett had seen the entire exchange, the way Alicia had paled when she overheard the meeting, the way Sarah had pulled her aside. And for the first time, he smiled. "Now it's getting interesting," he murmured to himself. Alicia had no idea that she was no longer fighting this battle alone. Alicia barely slept that night. The words she had overheard in that conference room echoed in her mind like a warning bell. They were setting her up. Every difficult patient, every grueling double shift, every scrutinized mistake, it wasn't just bad luck. It was calculated. By the time she walked into St. Mary's the next morning, she was ready. Or at least, she thought she was. The moment she clocked in, she was swamped with impossible assignments. Alicia was handed a patient load double that of her colleagues, all while being given the most unstable cases, patients who were either difficult, unpredictable, or in critical condition. Room 209. An elderly woman experiencing respiratory failure. Room 315. A diabetic patient who had gone into shock. Room 412. A combative post-op patient who refused care. And worst of all, Room 305. Mr. Donaldson. He was waiting for her. As she walked in, his lip curled. "Back again? I told them I didn't want." I know what you told them, Alicia cut him off. Her voice steady but firm. She wasn't here to argue. She was here to do her job. She checked his vitals, ignoring the venom in his words. Every insult bounced off her like armor. But the battle wasn't just in the patient rooms. At the nurse's station, her name was whispered in hushed conversations. She caught the flickers of amusement on some of their faces, as if they were waiting to see how long she would last. Dr. Hayes made sure to make his presence known, stopping by her workstation with a condescending smirk. I see they're keeping you busy, he mused. I trust you're keeping up? Alicia met his gaze without flinching. I'm managing just fine, doctor. His smirk deepened. Let's hope so. Meanwhile, Thomas Bennett was watching everything. From his room, he saw the way Alicia was being set up to fail. He saw the way nurses would give her side glances, how doctors ignored her, how she was deliberately handed the hardest assignments. Most interesting of all? She wasn't breaking. She wasn't lashing out. She wasn't crumbling. She was enduring. But Thomas knew endurance wasn't enough. They wanted her gone, and they would keep pushing her until they found an excuse to make it happen. So, he decided it was time to push back. Later that evening, as Alicia finished her rounds, she walked past Thomas's room, glancing inside to find him sitting up, watching her. You look tired, he said. She sighed, forcing a tired smile. That obvious? To me, yeah. A beat of silence. Then, in a calm, measured tone, Thomas dropped a bombshell. They're trying to get rid of you. Alicia stilled. She had never told him anything. Had never mentioned what she had overheard. How did he know? They're waiting for you to make a mistake, he continued, his eyes sharp, unreadable. And if you don't, they'll create one for you. Alicia's heart pounded. He knew. But instead of asking how, she studied him carefully. Why are you telling me this? Thomas tilted his head, considering her. Then, with the faintest smirk, he replied, because I don't like watching good people lose. Alicia didn't know it yet. But she had just gained the most powerful ally in the hospital. Alicia had endured many battles in her life, but nothing prepared her for what was coming next. The whispers behind her back had turned into open resentment. The subtle exclusion had escalated into outright sabotage. Her supplies would mysteriously go missing right before critical procedures. Her patient charts would be misfiled, delaying treatments. Orders from doctors would suddenly be changed, always in ways that made her look incompetent. And then came the surgery. It started as a normal day, until Dr. Hayes himself approached Alicia at the nurse's station. Nurse Johnson, he said, his voice thick with authority. We have an emergency procedure scheduled this afternoon. I need you in the OR. Alicia blinked. This wasn't normal. She had assisted in surgeries before, but never in high-profile ones. Those were always reserved for senior nurses. Something felt off. Of course, doctor, she answered cautiously. As she scrubbed in later that afternoon, the tension in the air was suffocating. This wasn't just any surgery. This was a high-stakes operation being observed by the hospital's board members and major donors. A mistake here would be catastrophic. Which, of course, was exactly what they wanted. The surgery began. Dr. Hayes stood at the operating table. The patient prepped and under anesthesia. The room buzzed with focused energy, every movement precise. Alicia stood ready, assisting where needed. At first, everything seemed normal. And then, she saw it. Dr. Hayes was making a mistake. Alicia's pulse spiked. His scalpel hovered dangerously close to the wrong artery. If he cut too deep, the patient would bleed out instantly. Her training kicked in. She had to speak up. Doctor, she said carefully, her voice firm but respectful. The incision should be 2 centimeters higher to avoid the arterial branch. Silence. The surgical team froze. Dr. Hayes' hands stopped mid-air. The tension in the room was suffocating. No one spoke. No one moved. Finally, Dr. Hayes turned his head, and the look he gave her was pure venom. "Are you questioning my technique, Nurse Johnson?" His voice was dangerously low. Alicia's heart pounded, but she didn't flinch. "I'm prioritizing the patient's safety," she answered evenly. For a moment, she thought he would ignore her. He had every reason to. He could dismiss her as an overstepping nurse, humiliate her, or worse, fire her on the spot. But something stopped him. A voice. "She's right." Thomas Bennett. He was standing at the viewing window, watching the entire procedure. A ripple of confusion passed through the room. Why was a patient in the observation deck? But Alicia didn't have time to question it, because Dr. Hayes hesitated. For the first time, the surgeon's confidence wavered. He looked at the cut again, then, with a clenched jaw, adjusted his approach. The surgery proceeded. The patient survived. But Alicia had just crossed a line she could never return from. And everyone in that room knew it. The surgery was over. The patient was stable. But Alicia hadn't won, not yet. The moment she stepped out of the OR, Dr. Hayes was waiting for her. His jaw was tight, his hands clenched at his sides. But it wasn't just anger. It was something darker. "Nurse Johnson. My office. Now." Alicia's pulse pounded, but she kept her face neutral. She knew what was coming. He was going to punish her. She followed him down the hall, past the watchful stares of nurses and doctors who had just witnessed what happened in the OR. Some looked amused. Others looked nervous. But no one, not one person, looked surprised. This was what they had been waiting for. The ambush. The moment Alicia stepped into Dr. Hayes' office, he slammed the door shut behind her. "Who the hell do you think you are?" he hissed, stepping closer. Alicia held her ground. "I was doing my job, doctor." "Your job," he repeated mockingly. "Your job is to follow orders. Not to question me in front of an entire operating room. Do you have any idea what you've done?" "I saved the patient," Alicia said evenly. His face twisted into a sneer. "You humiliated me. In front of my team. In front of the hospital board. You think they'll forget that?" Alicia's chest tightened, but she refused to back down. "If they care more about your pride than a patient's life, then this hospital has bigger problems than I thought." She saw it then, the moment his temper snapped. He stepped in close, lowering his voice to a dangerous whisper. "Listen to me, you self-righteous little." A knock on the door. Both of them froze. Then, the door swung open. And standing there, calm and composed, was Thomas Bennett. The revelation. Dr. Hayes' face drained of color. "Mr. Bennett," he stammered. I didn't realize." "That I was listening?" Thomas interrupted smoothly, stepping inside. "That I saw every move you made in that OR?" His gaze flicked to Alicia, assessing her, then back to Hayes. His expression was unreadable. But his next words changed everything. "I think it's time we have a real conversation, doctor. Because you seem to have forgotten who you're talking to." Alicia saw it then, the fear in Dr. Hayes' eyes. Not anger. Not arrogance. Fear. Because Thomas wasn't just a patient. He was someone far more powerful. "Who are you?" Dr. Hayes demanded, his voice shaking. Thomas smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "I'm the CEO of Healthcare United. And as of this moment, I own the future of this hospital." A beat of silence. Then, Dr. Hayes staggered back, his face frozen in shock. Alicia's breath caught. CEO. That wasn't just powerful. That was untouchable. Thomas Bennett wasn't just a patient, He had been investigating St. Mary's all along. And Alicia? She had just become the key to exposing everything. For a moment, no one spoke. Dr. Hayes looked as if the ground had been ripped out from under him. His once confident demeanor had shattered, replaced with something Alicia had never seen before, pure panic. You're lying," he muttered. Thomas smiled coldly. "Am I?" He stepped forward, pulling a document from his pocket and sliding it across Dr. Hayes' desk. Alicia caught a glimpse of the hospital's official letterhead. But before she could read more, Dr. Hayes snatched it up, eyes darting over the contents. With every second that passed, his face turned paler. These are my performance records," Hayes whispered. "My case reviews. My patient complaints. And a detailed log of every incident of discrimination, misconduct, and power abuse under your leadership," Thomas finished. "Oh, and let's not forget the anonymous board review scheduled for next week." Hayes' hands trembled. You can't just walk in here and..." "I can," Thomas interrupted smoothly. "And I have. You see, when I checked into this hospital, I wasn't just another patient. I was here to observe. To see how this institution really runs. And what I found. Well..." His smile sharpened. "It's rotten to the core." Alicia exhaled slowly. It was finally happening. The downfall of Dr. Hayes. But then, the unexpected happened. Dr. Hayes laughed. It was a bitter, hollow sound, but it sent a shiver down Alicia's spine. "You think this changes anything?" he sneered. "You really believe you can just walk in and take me down? I built this hospital. I have friends on the board, allies in administration, hell, half the senior staff owe me favors." He turned to Alicia then, and his smile twisted into something cruel. "And you? You actually thought you won? Sweetheart, you don't get to win. Not here." Alicia's stomach turned. "You know what happens next?" Hayes continued, his voice dropping to a whisper. "They'll investigate. Maybe they'll even suspend me for a while to make it look good. But they won't fire me. They need me. And you?" His gaze flicked toward Thomas before settling on her again. "The moment he leaves, you'll be back on your own. And this time, I'll make sure you don't just lose your job, you'll never work in a hospital again." Silence. Alicia's heart pounded. Could he be right? She had fought so hard. Had finally exposed him, but what if that wasn't enough? What if he survived this? What if he came back stronger? For the first time, doubt crept into her mind. But then, Thomas let out a low chuckle. "That's a nice speech," he mused. "Really? It is. But there's just one problem. Dr. Hayes." Hayes narrowed his eyes. "And what's that?" Thomas leaned in slightly, lowering his voice. "You assume I only planned for this moment. But I've been planning for what happens next." A slow smirk crossed his face. "Check your email." Alicia watched in stunned silence as Dr. Hayes hesitated, then reached for his computer. His fingers trembled as he typed in his login credentials. The moment the screen loaded, his entire body stiffened. A choked sound escaped his lips. No, this can't." Alicia stepped forward, peering over his shoulder. It was an email. From the hospital board. Subject: Urgent, Board Decision. Dr. Richard Hayes. Following an internal investigation, as well as an independent review conducted by Healthcare United, the board of St. Mary's General Hospital has reached a decision. Effective immediately, you are placed on administrative leave pending termination due to violations of ethical conduct, patient endangerment, and abuse of power. You are required to vacate your position by end of day today. Security will escort you from the premises. Sincerely, the Board of Directors. Hayes made a strangled noise, his eyes scanning the message over and over as if willing the words to disappear. Alicia felt her breath catch. This wasn't just a suspension. This was permanent. Thomas had outmaneuvered him completely. But before she could process the victory, the next blow came. Because just as security arrived to escort Hayes out, a new email notification popped up on Alicia's screen. And when she opened it, her stomach dropped. Subject: Review of Nurse Johnson's conduct. It was an internal complaint against her. And the name at the bottom? Sarah. The very same nurse who had warned her weeks ago. The one person Alicia thought had been on her side. The email claimed Alicia had violated hospital policies, created a hostile work environment, and acted unprofessionally in patient care. Alicia's hands went cold. "You think I was the only one who wanted you gone?" Hayes murmured as security grabbed his arm. His voice was gleeful now. "Looks like someone else got to you first." Alicia couldn't breathe. She had won the battle. But was she about to lose the war? Alicia's fingers trembled as she scrolled through the email. A formal investigation had been opened against her. The accusations, misconduct, insubordination, even creating division within the hospital, were all fabricated. But they were dangerous. It was a trap. Her first instinct was disbelief. Sarah? The same nurse who had whispered warnings in the hallway? Why? But then she saw it. At the bottom of the email was a statement. Multiple staff members have corroborated these complaints. It wasn't just Sarah. It was them. All of them. Alicia felt sick. She had thought removing Dr. Hayes would end it. She had thought justice would be enough. But now she saw the truth: the system never protected people like her. They had lost their leader, but they weren't going to lose control. Unless she fought back. The last stand. The next morning, Alicia entered the hospital with her head held high. She wasn't afraid. Not anymore. She wasn't alone. Because Thomas Bennett was waiting for her. The moment she stepped inside, he fell into step beside her. "I saw the email." His voice was calm. But there was steel behind it. "They're trying to take me down," Alicia murmured. "Let them try." He handed her a file. Alicia skimmed the contents, then stopped cold. Inside were signed statements from staff members detailing the real misconduct happening inside St. Mary's, from racial discrimination to medical negligence. Names were listed. Specific incidents documented. It was enough evidence to burn the entire institution down. Alicia looked at him, stunned. "How did you?" "While you were fighting in the trenches, I was preparing for war," Thomas said simply. "You wanted to win this battle. I want to win the whole damn war. The reckoning." By noon, the truth was out. Alicia and Thomas marched into the hospital board meeting, armed with the file. The complaint against Alicia? Exposed as a retaliation tactic. The staff members who had lied? Caught in their own contradictions. The toxic culture of St. Mary's? Now public knowledge. But the final blow? Thomas made an announcement. Healthcare United will no longer partner with institutions that foster discrimination and malpractice. He wasn't just pulling funding, he was replacing the leadership at St. Mary's. With her. A new beginning. By the time the dust settled, St. Mary's was unrecognizable. Dr. Hayes was finished. The worst of the staff were gone. The hospital was forced to undergo a complete transformation. And at the heart of it all? Alicia. She was no longer just the nurse they had tried to break. She was St. Mary's new chief diversity officer. She had won. But as she walked through the newly restructured hospital, she couldn't shake one thought. How many others were still fighting battles like hers? How many never got the chance to win? Thomas seemed to read her thoughts. "This isn't the end. You know," he said. Alicia exhaled. "No," she agreed. "It's just the beginning." And with that, she stepped forward, ready for whatever came next. Lessons from Alicia's story. Standing against injustice in the real world. Alicia's journey at St. Mary's isn't just a story, it's a reflection of what many people face in workplaces today. Whether it's systemic discrimination, workplace politics, or being underestimated because of race, gender, or background, the reality is that toxic environments exist everywhere. So what can we learn from her? Know your worth. Like Alicia, don't let others define your value. Stay confident in your skills and never let discrimination make you doubt your own capabilities. Document everything. When facing injustice, keep records. Proof is power, and having evidence can be the difference between winning and losing a fight. Build the right allies. Not everyone is a friend. But not everyone is an enemy either. Find those who genuinely support you and stand together. Speak up. Even when it's hard, staying silent allows corruption to thrive. If you see wrongdoing, call it out. It takes courage. But change only happens when people refuse to back down. Play the long game. Justice isn't always immediate. Be strategic. Be patient. Be relentless. Alicia's story is proof that resilience, intelligence, and the right allies can dismantle even the most toxic systems. So the question is, when the time comes, will you stand up for what's right?